And joining me right now is Oklahoma Senator, member of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. James Lankford is here. Senator, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Good to see you. You bet. Good to see you again.
So Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is saying that the Senate will take up the legislation after it passes the House. What are your thoughts? The House already passed a bill to raise the debt ceiling and put limitations in place. What happens when that bill gets to the Senate, or how do you see this playing out once Joe Biden gets back from Japan?
So if it's the bill that actually the House passed and comes over to the Senate, I'd be glad to be able to vote for that because that makes real progress on it. We'll see what the final negotiated process actually brings out of this. The amazing thing to me is it was 98 days and President Biden wouldn't even talk to Speaker McCarthy and said, you got to do my way or the highway. You don't negotiate in Washington, which is absolutely absurd. And so finally, at least they're sitting down and they're having opportunities to be able to talk through that. Now they're on the staff level, sitting down, trying to be able to work through details. That's a good thing. But people have got to realize we have $31.5 trillion in total debt. We have more than the GDP of the nation. We should have adult conversations to say, how do we change the trajectory of this? Not going to solve it all at once, but we've got to at least change the direction of our spending and our overspending. And this is an entirely appropriate moment to do that.
And we know that, clawing back the unspent COVID money is not going to move the needle. So what, from your sense, is really the big things to get your arms around? Where do you see common ground in terms of actually what can get done next week?
Yeah, so clawing back unspent COVID funds, that is the low-hanging fruit, changing the way that we do the budget process. Last year, we had this massive omnibus bill that literally no one in Congress had read. There's all kinds of issues. I put out a book every year called Federal Fumbles that exposes some of the waste in government. A lot of that happened with that massive omnibus bill that happens. We have to change the process of how we do it. We have to end government shutdowns in the way that they're working and actually forcing us to be able to vote for bad bills. We need to deal with the permitting issues that is slowing down our economy. So there are ways to help the economy grow, decrease federal spending, and change the structure of how we do it so it gets better in the future.
Yeah, we just showed your 7th volume of your Federal Fumbles book, and I want to talk about that because this is a series that you have come up with, which is blasting reckless government spending as debt limit negotiations continue. You point out that the State Department awarded over $20,000 to a culture center in Ecuador to host 12 drag shows. What? By God, what are we doing with our money? Is this the reason that we have to face higher taxes so that we can pay for this stuff? What are the other federal funds?
No, people are working a second job and working overtime on one of them to be able to pay their taxes so that the federal government, the State Department, can pay for drag shows in Ecuador to exhibit American values. That was the goal of that, is to exhibit American values in Ecuador. Well, we also, by the way, paid to learn the secret language of butchers in Paris. Apparently, Paris butchers since the 13th century have spoken a secret language, and so we spent American tax dollars to study that. We spent American tax dollars to study butterflies in Germany and paid a Swedish scientist to do that study in Germany on European butterflies. It's just waste and fraud that's out there of just money that's being spent that we try to identify and say, while President Biden is saying there's nowhere to cut, we've just got to keep going, we try to identify some of the most absurd areas of wasteful spending and to say there's lots of big areas of wasteful spending, like almost $1 billion on these soft-sided facilities down on the border. But there's also lots of areas that need additional oversight, and for someone to raise their hand and say that is not consistent with our values.
Yeah, well, thanks for doing that, because we're all questioning who the heck is in charge here. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene now unveiling articles of impeachment against President Biden. She did this yesterday over his handling of the border. She also introduced articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas earlier this week. Senator, you've been to the border. You're visiting Arizona's southern border next week with Senator Christian Sinema. Give us your sense of where we are here, and is it appropriate to come up with an impeachment article because of this dereliction of duty on the president's as well as Mayorkas' side?
So obviously anyone can file articles of impeachment. The Democrats filed an article of impeachment against President Trump for a phone call he made to President Zelensky they didn't like. So obviously any of that can be done on it. What we've got to have is a real answer of what's actually happening on the border. That's what we really need. If we impeach President Biden, we get then President Kamala Harris after that. I'm not sure a lot of people are super excited about that. So here's the basics that we need to do. We've got to change the way we handle asylum at our border. Right now, it's a very low threshold for just coming across the border. All you have to say is the magic words: "I have fear in my country," and the administration just releases you into the United States and puts you in line to get into an asylum hearing. Many of those asylum hearings, for instance, in New York, are 10 years in the future. So you can go anywhere you want to in the country. You can work anywhere in the country if you just say the magic words, "I have fear in my country." We have to change that threshold. We also have to change the issue of you can't just go anywhere in the world and then come to the United States and request asylum. That's not how it works in most places in the world. America is the greatest country in the world, and I understand why people would want to come here, but we have an orderly, legal immigration process they need to go through, not skipping through the loopholes that are in our system. So close down the way we do asylum. Make sure that people actually request asylum in their closest country to where they are. That's the international standard. Stop having a low threshold for the screening part of it, and enforce the law and actually close down the border.
Well, it's a good point, because we do give out or issue 1 million visas a year. So we've got a process in place. All of these people are jumping the line. Real quick, Senator, did you just say that you believe Joe Biden likely should be impeached, but you're afraid to do so because of what the alternative will be? Kamala Harris will be the president? Is that a feeling within the Congress right now?
So that is a House opinion on who they want to impeach. The Senate actually has to have the trial on it. I am concerned that we're becoming a nation that just every time a new president comes, we're going to have a new impeachment. Democrats have brought this on us just to do this repetitive number on it. I don't think that's good for the American people. I don't think it's good for us long term on it. And quite frankly, getting a President Kamala Harris at the end of that isn't a good result. And quite frankly, if you go back to 1979, where the economy was now, the American people looked at the economy and looked at Jimmy Carter and said, nope, let's get somebody brand new. And that is what will actually make the change.
Well, the democratic process will take hold. James Lankford, good to see you this morning, sir. Thank you, Senator.
Yeah, good to see you.